and to discuss the Hugos some more. Unfortunately, I had a technical difficulty with the Google Plus app, and because I'm the one hosting it, that caused the event to end. So, sorry about that, but we're back now. And we were in the middle of talking differences between sad puppies and rabid puppies. Anyone else want to talk about that?
I think one of the things is it's about the argument that they put forwards is, I'm not sure about the rabid puppies. There's not people that I have follow a lot or read a lot of their output, but I've seen a lot of the arguments from the sad puppies about how they're just trying to put forward, you know, good works that are not social justice warrior works, that are not political message fics, putting forward a certain point of view. And yeah, I can see their point that they feel shut out because they get rejected by all the left-wing people. There was some very like sob stories about going to the World Cons and, you know, not being let in and whatever. Well, not literally not let in, but like not allowed to join the groups and things. And that can be very disconcerting, but the problem is they are addressing it as though their position is neutral and that the left-wing social justice warrior position is political. Whereas any position, neutral, however they may see the world as it currently is, that is a political choice, you know, to put forward a religious or conservative or, you know, heterosexual lifestyle. All of those are political. What we think of as normal is not in any way normal. It just happens to be the way things are kind of now, and actually not so much the way things are if you look around the world. But yeah, that's my thought.
It's that typical presentation of science fiction likes to talk about the things of the day, and a lot of these issues are issues of our day. It looks forward to them and says, well, what if we amplified it more? Like, this is the usual statement, right? What if we amplified that more? What if we stressed it more? What if we downplayed it more? Or what if we abolished it altogether to see what the thought experiment would lead us to if the story lacked that conversation or lacked those elements? I mean, it's not... All of science fiction has been like that. You know, even stuff from the early 1900s, it's never really shied away from it.
Absolutely. But it's just that thing that suggesting that one way of putting forward fiction, like one type of fiction is political or message fic and the other isn't, that it's neutral, like that the sad puppy type of fiction, whatever that might be, is purely neutral and just good, whereas everything else is good and message fic. No, everything is message fic. Everything has a message that it's putting forward or not putting forward. That it happens to be liberal or conservative is, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you look back, like the Lensman series, and even like John Carter of Mars, those ones going way back, are incredibly colonial. You know, like gung-ho, one society is awesome, let's go take over everything else. They all have that kind of imperialistic, just spread and let everyone enjoy the goodness of our one ideal. And those books were written for children, right? Like, they're not, you know, they may not have intended that, but just like the culture of the age had those messages kind of built into it. It's not... Yeah, you're right. Like, these messages are everywhere.
You can be adventure-y and liberal and adventure-y and conservative, or, you know, whatever. Yeah, it just is.
Alright. So, what did you guys talk about while I was disappeared?
I have no idea.
I'm not sure when we went off air.
We mostly talked about you, so.
Yeah. Oh, we're still missing Thomas.
I miss Thomas.
Oh. Should we continue on this vein while we wait for him? Or are we...
We may have gone off air when we were talking. We started talking about the quality of the nominated works a little bit. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, you came back. Everything froze for me for a second, and I was very concerned. How he was reading more from some of the other awards, like the Artistic Art Award and the Nebula Award this year. So do you guys, I guess, I still plan to read as many of the works as I can. I'm probably not going to get to Skin Game, which is the Dresden Files book, because it's book 15 in the series, and I haven't started that series. But otherwise, I plan to read them. But I'd also like to kind of take this opportunity to read more of the other awards that are presented in science fiction and fantasy. Are you guys planning to do something similar? What are your thoughts on some of the other awards that are out there?
I plan on doing something. I'm reading shortlists from the Nebullas, the Clark Awards, the Kitschies. I'm really interested in the Kitschi nominations this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of us.
You can.
Okay, right. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm concentrating on right now. I guess this is where we got cut off last time. The Nebula nominees and the Clark nominees are what I'm pretty much focusing on when I'm building my queue at the moment. So those I think are the books that are really strong, representative. As for the other Hugo nominees, I don't have a problem with a guy like Jim Butcher, whose work I like, getting on the Hugo ballot or any of the other writers, but at the moment, again, because these are books that are very advanced and well into a lengthy series, it's not a priority for me. I think I actually got up to about book 6 or 7 of the Dresden Files. Loved them. Really liked them, although I understand people tell me the series kind of goes south after a little bit. But yeah, it's the Clarks and Nebulas right now are what I'm focusing my review queue on.
Yeah, and just from like a totally not even talking about voting slate perspective, like the Nebulas seem to have less like sequels in series books nominated for best novel, so that's a little bit easier for me to approach. Like I think like 3 out of the 5 in the Hugos are second or later books in the series, right? So
technically it's 4 out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kind of. So the Darkness Between Stars is the first book in a sequel series.
Oh.
So the previous series is 7 or 8 books long, and they're all quite long, and I looked into it. So technically, The Goblin Emperor is the only first book standalone. Ancillary Sword is a sequel. The Dresden Files, as we mentioned, is 15 books in, and the other one, I know the first book in that series is Terms of Enlistment because I have it on my
Lines of
audio right now.
Departure, I think.
What is it?
Lines of Departure.
Lines of Departure
Yes.
is the second book in that series. So anyone else planning on reading other awards, or where are you going to focus your reading?
I'm focusing on the Nebula as well. I was actually really looking forward to the Hugos, and I was already planning on reading the Nebulas and the Hugos this year, the shortlists. But I'm definitely focusing on the Nebulas now because I think most of the books are things that I actually really want to read. So yeah, I don't want to force myself to read stuff I don't like. So yeah.
But haven't you heard? Nobody really reads all that literary stuff. Nobody wants.
Yeah, right.
Everybody just wants, Spaceman Spiff and my spaceship doing space things. That's what real science fiction fans want, right? All that literary, highbrow, egghead stuff. That's boring. No one buys
that. Doesn't sell, right?
The culture.
I'm definitely going to read the short stories for sure from the Nebulas. That's usually one of my favorite parts of the Hugos is the short stories, because I don't read a lot of short stories, and so it's kind of a nice time for me to be like, hey, here's some short stories to check out. And yeah, I'll read the Hugo short stories too, but I definitely am interested in the Nebula short stories and novellas and all that.
Yeah, there's some exciting stuff in some of the other awards, but it is worth noting that if we're encouraging people to read other shortlists, which definitely do, please, they are great. That the reason they're very different in their listings this year especially is that the way that the shortlists and the winners are chosen is completely different than that of the Hugos. They're panel judged, and all of them, I'm pretty sure, Nebulas, Clarks, and whatever else were we talking about, Kitschies. And the Nebulas are voted on the nominations, but they're voted on closed by the SFWA members, which is all professional authors, including some of the Sad and Rabid Puppy nominees, but yeah. So
There's also
just completely
You have to be an
different.
active SIFWA member to vote on.
Yeah.
nebulous.
There's 2 more awards that are coming out that are fan vote awards that are just getting their long list out now, and those are the Locus Award and the Gemma Award. And the Gemma Award focuses on fantasy, and the Locus Award is everything, and it's put out by Locus magazine. But they don't have their short list out yet. They're just in the long list phase.
And the long list for the Locus is very, very long.
Yeah.
Don't the Locus Awards have 2 separate lists for science fiction and fantasy? They separate them?
Yeah.
It bears mentioning that there was a bit of an issue, I think, back in like the early 2000s. A little bit of a, I won't say a scandal, but an embarrassment of log rolling taking place within the nebulas as well. And this was something that I think it came to a head when there was this little period where you looked at the nebulas, and those were the nominees that were really weird, right? They weren't really representative of the books that were getting the buzz, or the critical or fan enthusiasm during a given year. And I think it came to a head when a book won the Nebula called Quantum Rose by a woman named Catherine Asaro, which is this sort of space opera kind of romance sort of thing, but by no means something that like had garnered the reputation that year of being representative of the literary apex of science fiction that year. And I think it was because again this was a problem that was happening. Little sort of groups of friends within SIFWA were rallying and doing this sort of thing, and so it was recognized that there was a problem. And I think dealing with it was successful in such a way to where I think now the nebulas have kind of rehabilitated themselves, and that kind of thing isn't really done anymore, and so it's possible for a great many awards to have this kind of thing go on in the nomination process, and it's something that I think ought to be looked at very diligently. So yeah, but generally I think awards that are juried do, while you may say, well, it's rather highbrow tastes and not representative of populist tastes. But that's fine, though. First off, it's not always. I have always rejected this notion that there is this sharp dividing line between literary and entertainment. I think just a lot of people have a very broader definition of what they're entertained by, and some people are capable of being entertained by both. I love good popcorn novels as well as literary stuff, and I think more readers than not actually have that kind of versatility in what appeals to them. And I think it's a fallacy to say that the average person only wants just very simplistic escapism and nothing else. They don't want to engage their minds or be presented with ideas in their entertainment. I think that's untrue. I think it does a disservice not only to SF, but it's kind of insulting to the intelligence to the average fan, which I think is not really being given good credit here. So. But the Gemmels are a perfect example of how you can have all these alternatives and have a publicly voted, very popular award that, again, addresses a niche of fantasy publishing that isn't customarily recognized during, for example, Hugo and Nebula time, which is traditional epic fantasy, right? And guys like Brandon Sanderson and Brent Weeks, these are wildly popular writers, but you don't see them really on the Hugo ballots very often, or the Nebula ballots, even though they're, even though the Hugos are again presumably awarded by the general public, fans, if you happen to buy that WorldCom membership. So he's certainly a guy that the public tastes are, have approved of. So, but now you have this alternative award. Yeah.
The Gemma Awards are a pretty new award, and they were established in, I think, 2009, and they are to recognize fantasy, and specifically more like the darker sorts of fantasy is what he was interested in. And so yeah, so that award has become pretty popular pretty quickly. If that type of fantasy is something that appeals to you, it's definitely something that is worth checking out.
And if anyone's interested, the Australian Awards, the Aurealis Awards, they were announced today. So they've already done their shortlist, long list winners and everything, and it was a very nice selection, I got to say. Some things I already read and recognized and thought were excellent, so that's always good to start stepping outside the Britain-America selections, and there are many more awards around the world as well once you start looking into it, although I couldn't name any off the top of my head because I'm hopeless.
Yes. There are also the BSFAs. We haven't talked about those.
Oh yeah, I was at those.
Yeah.
I forgot about them. Yeah, I was there. That was last Saturday.
So there are, in fact, a bevy of other science fiction and fantasy awards if you are interested in checking them out, or just generally disinterested in what's going on with the Hugos this year, but still looking for recommendations. I've just quick plug for the read-along group. I've been opening threads for these as the shortlists come out, so there are a number of threads to discuss them if you're interested, and we're also doing a selection for some alternative reads for the group for people who may not be super interested in what is on the Hugo ballot this year. And yeah, so what do you guys think would have made it on the ballot? What were you pulling for in terms of books? I know I was pulling for Goblin Emperor, which made it on, so I'm happy anyway. But what about everybody else?
Annihilation, the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. Its absence is surprising to me.
True, I agree. I really love the Goblin Emperor as well, and I was expecting Annihilation to be on the list.
Mm-hmm. I also nominated The Causal Angel by Hanu Ryanimi and Lagoon by Nadia Korafor, and they didn't make it on.
Luckily, Lagoon has another year of eligibility next year.
Yes.
Which is very exciting. So hopefully, if things have calmed down, that might actually get shortlisted next year, because it was only published in the UK last year. It's being published in America this year. So anything published outside the USA gets an additional year of nomination possibility in its first year of publication inside the USA. I know this because I looked it up.
Yeah, Lagoon would definitely have been on my list if I had been nominating this year. It's just, yeah, like, but hearing that whole publication thing, I was always getting down because every time I brought it up, it was like, it's not out in the States, so don't expect it. And then City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett, but that's more, yeah. I would think more in keeping with, say, like the Nebula Awards. I was expecting that one to be on the Nebula Award docket, along with, say, like The Mirror Empire, versus getting onto the Hugo one.
I was thinking that Annihilation would be on the Nebulas as opposed to the Hugos, and City of Stairs would be on the Hugos, because Annihilation is just a bit more like, literary, to go back to our old thing.
Well, I agree with you actually there, Elizabeth. I was certainly expecting Annihilation to be a Nebula finalist, but I was thinking that it might miss the Hugo ballot, generally because it seems to me, just from what I've read on comments and general blogs and things, that Annihilation, or the Southern Reach trilogy generally, is a set of books that is really having an impact critically, and among other writers, and among that group of readers who do perhaps like the more the new weird and the more envelope-pushing kind of fiction. But among general fandom, it seems to be a book that's going either over or maybe around people's heads quite a bit, and so I thought it might miss the Hugo shortlists in that regard. But then I also thought, well, if we're going to apply Wheel of Time rules, then it could have been the case that the Southern Reach trilogy as a unit could have been on the shortlist. So that was a possibility I was looking at. I'm also thinking that the Three-Body Problem would have made it on the shortlist.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And quite possibly Station 11. City of Stairs, there are quite a few books that I believe got crowded out, and I think that you can look at several of the other shortlists this year to see what also might have been recognized. Lagoon probably would go on.
If any of you want a really in-depth exploration of what could have been on the Hugos, if it had gone like last year, then is it Chaos Horizon? I'll double check. It's been basically a year-long project to do apply statistics to the Hugos and Nebulas nomination process, and it's been insane. Like, it's been tracking all the numbers and what traditionally gets nominated in, and whether it's YA and whether it's fantasy and whether it's a second or third book or a first book, and all these different things, and how that feeds into the likelihood that something will be nominated. So, like we were talking about a 15th novel not going to win. A first novel, much more likely. So it's a really interesting project.
That actually sounds really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking as you guys were listing all those books, man, it's actually been a lot of really great books this year. It's been a good year.
It has been an amazing year, and I think that was part of the problem. It split the vote. Like, there were like 10 books that were really likely to get on the shortlist, and then actually the whole thing happened. But, you know, 2 of them were good front runners.
Even just looking at what's come out this year, next year's nominations, or like next year's shortlist, is going to be insane just because of how much is coming out by like big name authors and what interesting premises. Like, there's just so much coming out this year in SFF that is just like, that sounds like it would be on those types of lists. Yeah, it's I don't know. You look at and especially when you have really interesting stories from Neil Stephenson and Joe Walton and everything coming out. It's just like it's going to be a very hard choice next year, I think, for a lot of books.
That's something that this whole debacle with the pups has managed to distract people from, which is the fact that 2014 was a fantastic year for science fiction and fantasy, just in a literary sense, just in terms of the stories that were out there. And 2015 is shaping up to be another year like that. We're almost, you could say, we're in something of a maybe a golden age of excellence. And again, diverse voices, new ideas, new perspectives coming in to the genre and really shaking things up and giving us thrilling stories. But now it's being overshadowed by all of this silliness. But we were talking a little bit earlier now about how many different awards there are in SFF, and with the Gemmels and the Locuses and the Aurealis and what have you. And I think again that's just naturally showing the growth and the expansion of SFF that seems to be this thing that the puppies are also rallying against and finding very threatening. And with too much importance being placed upon the Hugos as the thing that must, be what validates us. It was the case once upon a time that, if you look at the early years of the Hugos, yeah, you can pretty much see this is the consensus of what became classic science fiction, what became sort of the benchmark novels for excellence in the genre. But you have to remember back then, there wasn't as much being published. A reasonably engaged and prolific reader of SF back in, say, the early 1960s could conceivably read everything that came out in a whole year, right? It may have been 60, 70 books. And there's hundreds every month now, and all appealing to different tastes, different groups. And so, sure, the Hugos were representative of general SFF excellence back then, but now, because it's such a bigger umbrella and a bigger community, it makes sense that we would have more awards, and in addition to a large swathe of fandom, I think, who just don't care about awards. They just want to read what they want to read.
I also
and that's fine.
To bring this back. So we talked a lot about the novel nominees. What about the short fiction nominees, which is really the place where the slate voting was especially effective? So I don't have that many things that I can say I definitely thought were going to show up in terms of the short fiction. I thought The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss was going to show up in the Best Novella category. There was also a novella by Brandon Sanderson that was in Dangerous Women that I read this year that I thought was likely to show up. But other than that, I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on the short fiction?
Not on what was likely to show up. I had a couple that I nominated, but yeah. Nothing that I thought was like, but then I didn't read the Sanderson or the Rothfuss because they're not top of my priorities.
What were some of, do you want to tell us some of your nominees?
Things that I think they're all things that I mentioned before. One extremely controversial one was Benjamin Sriwan Kyao's Scale Bright. Yeah, have to mention the controversy because lots of people would not have been happy if that had got on. She was on the BSFA shortlist for short fiction, and there was a lot of complaints about that, but I do think that it is a stunning novella, like it really is. So if you can put aside, well, you don't even have to put it aside, it is what it is. But less controversially, Octavia Cade, I've enjoyed her novella or novelette, not sure which category it ended up in, Trading Rosemary, which I reviewed last year, and she's also got a piece of short fiction that was eligible on the book Smugglers, and that was shortlisted for the BSFAs as well, called The Muscle Eater. She's a short fiction author that I've been following for the last year or so, and yeah, I think her work's amazing. And one that was on Tor.com, basically loads of the short fiction that was on Tor.com last year. Generally, Tor.com stuff can go in. You can pick out a few that they're going to get into that short fiction category.
I was surprised to see, I didn't clue into it until this morning when I was downloading the short stories, that Michael F. Flynn had one that was nominated. I totally didn't clue in that this is Michael Flynn, like the author of Eiffelheim and The River of Stars. I was excited to see that one, and so I want to check that story out, just because he's very different. He writes very differently than a lot of people, I think, and so that's one I'd want to check out. But I don't know if it was. I think it's a novella.
It's a novelette. It's the Journeyman in the Stone House. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
From Analog.
Yeah.
Anybody else have feelings on the short fiction?
Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
The only other one that I heard of for short fiction that I was kind of wondering if make it show up was John Scalzi's Hayden Syndrome novella from Tor.com.
The Lockout.
I haven't read it.
Yeah.
His novel.
But
Unlocked.
I've heard good things about it.
Oh, Unlocked. That's it.
Yeah, actually, I liked Unlocked better than Lockout. Fiction that much, or as much as I should. But what I have found to my great pleasure was that in the wake of, the Hugo nominees, people on Twitter have been posting just thread upon thread of, here's what I would have loved to have seen. Here's a short story that I think deserved it. And it just dozens and dozens of people are posting this sort of thing, and so consequently, I now have this list of links to short stories on Lightspeed and Tor.com and Clark's World and all of that to catch up on. And I thought, well, great, now so now I know what's out there that people are really loving, and so I get to catch up that way.
Mm. One related work that I would have liked to have seen, but I'm not sure if it had enough of an American release or not, was Kaleidoscope. It was launched at LonCon last year, so I know a few people picked it up, but it's an Australian press. It just won the Aurealis Best Anthology. It's a collection of diverse young adult science fiction and fantasy stories, and it's absolutely amazing, like so good. Some of the stuff in there is just wonderful. And there's some really good authors in there. Garth Nix, I think John Chu won.
Oh, that's not a Sophia Samatar story in it, right?
Yes, Sophia Samatar, a really good Sophia Samatar story. Yeah, just some amazing stuff, and I definitely put that on I think I put it in related work because it's an anthology and it's kind of hard to put somewhere else. But yeah, really amazing works in there. But yeah, I don't know. Even if we hadn't had this chaos, I'm not sure it's had enough of an American side release. But I don't know.
Okay. So, do you guys want to talk a little bit theoretically about what we think is going to happen with the Hugos next year? And there have been a lot of rule changes proposed at this point. The way the rule changes to the Hugos work is that they must be voted on at the business meeting at the Worldcon for 2 consecutive years. So they have to be approved 2 consecutive years. So there won't be any major rule changes happening next year in response to this, but there may be in 2 years. So a little bit about kind of what we think will happen next year and what rule changes, if any, you all would like to see to try and prevent this in the future.
There's actually one rule change that might be happening next year because it's already had one reading. Which is the thing to not sell a supporting membership or a voting rights for any less than the cost of a supporting membership, which would actually, if it passes this year, would put paid to some of the suggested plans to reduce the cost of nominating and being able to nominate each year but not vote each year. Which would open up the nominating pool and encourage more people to vote. So yeah, that might affect some of the other proposals that go in this year.
Yes, and I would like to say the one that Elizabeth just mentioned I'm actually personally against, because if I first found out about the Hugos when I was in undergrad and I was pretty broke, and if there had been a cheaper option for like 1 year of nominating or 1 year of voting, I probably would have gotten involved in this process a lot sooner. So I am against the idea of not allowing for a cheaper membership, because I would have benefited from that. So yeah. But anyway, any other thoughts?
All I can think is that a great deal of discussion is going to happen, and so and beyond that, I'm not really prepared to predict, but I do expect to see some kind of changes. I don't think that in 2016 we're going to see another repeat year of the Sad Puppies 2, simply because the response and the reaction that happened. I mean, it's conceivable. They're certainly already gearing up to campaign for it. Sorry, Elizabeth?
Sad Puppies 4. This is 3.
Well, right, but this is the first year that they, I guess I meant in terms of dominating. But you're right, this is overall the 4th year that they have attempted, and this was the first year, I guess, of actual flag capture. So, yeah, so what I meant to say was I don't think we'll see a repeat of 2015, but I still think that discussion is going to happen, and beyond that, I don't hang out with too many people who do small stuff, so I guess if I ever do get a chance to talk to some of them, I'll get some scoop.
I'd be surprised if it didn't happen again next year. They're really pissed off, and getting more so the more everybody fights back, which is sad. But yeah, I kind of expecting it to happen again next year.
I think they're certainly going to, attempt it, but whether or not the results will be the same or what will go on, we'll just have to wait and see. But it's sad that they just want to keep playing this game, because that's just not what it's about.
And do you guys think maybe the opposite will happen? Like another group of people will be trying to nominate other ballots for the awards, like as a response to the Sad Puppies? I wouldn't like that personally, but do you guys think that would happen?
No. I think there's been quite an outcry against responding in that way. I don't think it would be a popular choice.
Yeah, and also one of the discussions that was going on quite vocally at EastCon, where there are quite a few active members of the Worldcon and stuff were attending. I was doing a lot of listening in. Was that they are hoping to bring in, one of the suggestions is to bring in an anti-collusion rule, where you basically use statistics to posit that if so many votes come in with exact identical voting ballots, then that is considered to be collusion, and they'll bring in a rule against that. So that would completely negate anybody doing the opposite.
They would just automatically invalidate those ballots?
I'm not sure. It was half a conversation, but it was one of the things that somebody was suggesting, whether or not it'll get put forward as a movement, and whether or not it will even be allowed to pass, because campaigning is perfectly allowed at the moment. Who knows? And you couldn't say it happens in party politics, so how much it can be discriminated against in something like this, I don't know, and I'm not sure it could be, but it was under discussion.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of proposals talking about the anti-collusion type rules. I don't know how realistic it is that something like that will get passed, because from what I've seen, the methods for determining if collusion was happening would be fairly mathematically intensive, which is, not necessarily, not everybody would want to do that. I can understand what they're talking about, but I don't know how many other people would be able to understand it, because it involves some fairly high level of statistical analysis.
Proving that it had been accurately and fairly done, and that it wasn't discriminating accidental votes that had been done through, it's just a nightmare. I don't think it's got any chance of going through, but, I think there's a strong movement against, ballots and things like that.
There have been 2 proposals that I think might have a chance that, mostly because I think they're kind of good ideas anyway. One would be to reduce the number of nomination slots from 5 to 3 and keep the number of nominees the same at 5, and the other would be to just increase the number of nominees. So, I mean, they're basically doing the same thing. They're not directly combating anti-collusion, but they're making it so that you can't force nominees off the ballot by the sort of block voting. So it would either increase the ballot size, increase the number of nominees, or just decrease the ballot size so that it would make it more difficult and make more nominees available. And I think some of those stand a reasonable chance, just because they're not like terrible ideas in general and they don't really specifically target anyone. I think particularly like 3 nominees. I don't know how many people normally nominate more than 3 nominees in a particular category.
Yeah. Only in novels do people really fill the ballot. Like, I think putting 3 out of a 5 nominee shortlist is a really good idea of, like, you know, way to divide up that play. So yeah.
Anyway, so anybody else have any comments on that bit?
No.
All right. So yes. So any other thoughts from anybody? Is there anything? I know we had some technical problems, so I'm a little bit off in terms of what we've talked about and what we haven't. Anybody got anything burning that they really want to talk about while we're still all here?
Did we actually cover the shortlist?
I don't think that we did. Whoops. Okay, so yeah, so so I guess we talked about what is nominated in Best Novel.
You do the full list.
And asked around about the short fiction. I can think.
Okay, so I guess I can pull that up. So for Best Novel, there was Ancillary Sword, which is the sequel to Ancillary Justice, which won last year. The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, which is a standalone fantasy novel. Now I'm blanking. Skin Game by Jim Butcher, which is the 15th book in his long-running Dresden Files series. Lines of Departure, which is by Marco Kloos, and it is the 2nd book in his Frontline series, the 1st book being Terms of Enlistment. And then The Darkness Between Stars by Kevin J. Anderson, which is the 1st book in a series that is the sequel series to the Shadow of the Sun series, I think, or something like that.
Song of Seven Sons or something like that. Yeah.
Song of Seven Sons. And then I think the new series is Shadow of the Suns, something like that. And I haven't really heard anyone talk about that, but my impression is that you can just read that one as a standalone, but it might spoil the previous series. So if you were planning to read the previous series, you might want to read that before reading the 1st book in the new series. I'm planning on just reading the 1st book in the new series.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's nothing that makes me more enthusiastic to read a book than realizing that I have to read 8 previous 700-page books.
Well, it's the continual nominations of Bujold that have gotten me reading the Vorkosigan saga, because it's just like, oh, Cryoburn, that sounds like a cool story. What? It's book how many in a series? Well, I guess I'll go to the start then, and it's been great.
Yeah, Vorkosigan saga seems a little unusual to me because there are so many books in that series that have been nominated and quite a few that have won. I don't know of any other long-running series that's had that many nominations.
Yeah.
That's in part because with the Vorkosigan saga, though, they're like little sub-series, so similar to the Discworld, where there's like sub-series within the series, so you can jump in. I mean, you might spoil yourself for previous books if you jump in at like series 3 of, however many total series there are within the series, but yeah, you can do it.
Yeah, I think 2 of the Miles novels have won Hugos, and then Bujold overall has won what? She's tied Heinlein for 4 Best Novel Hugos, which is the most won by a single author. So,
I know that it's interesting this year because normally when the list comes out, there's at least 1 or 2 books that I think typically we've already read, whereas this year, because I put off reading Ancillary Sword and other things, it's like I've read none of the books this year, so it's been a complete sort of, I gotta catch up and read a ton now.
I read one last year, to be fair.
Yeah, there's one that's on there that I've read, yay! But yeah,
that's me almost every year, Brock. Don't worry, don't worry about that.
I think one category that BookTube people who might be watching this might be interested in is the Best Graphic Story category.
Ah, yes.
and which got very nice nominations. One of the few categories to be relatively unaffected.
So in that category, we have Miss Marvel Volume 1, No Normal by G. Willow Wilson, Rat Queens Volume 1, Sass and Sorcery by Curtis J. Weeb, Zombie Nation Book Number 2, Reduce, Reuse, Reanimate by Carter Reed, Saga Volume 3 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and Sex Criminals Volume 1, One Weird Trick by Matt Fraction. And so yeah, that is a pretty interesting list. I've read 3 of those, and at this point I'm pulling for Rat Queens, but I haven't read Sex Criminals yet.
Oh my god, Rat Queens.
Maybe bad.
I read Saga Volume 1, I haven't got up to Volume 3, but I definitely will be getting there, and Miss Marvel I need to pick up quite soon. So, yeah.
Saga's really strong. I'd almost think that it might be split between Miss Marvel and Sex Criminals for no justifiable reason in my head, but Rat Queens would actually be a pretty awesome Hugo win.
Has anybody read Sex Criminals? I don't know anything about it.
I have it on my shelf, but I haven't read it yet. It's about a man and a woman who both have a superpower, and that is when they orgasm, they can stop time. So they decide to go rob banks and things, and I don't know, do cool things while they have time stopped.
Okay.
Yeah, I really want to read that series, but I don't really want it on my shelf. So maybe I'll read it digitally. We'll see.
I don't think I'll be asking my
What
library
on your
to get that
Google
one.
history instead?
Yeah. For Audacity, I think.
And so, okay, so talking about the novella category, the nominees are Big Boys Don't Cry by Tom Cartman, Flow by Arlen Andrews Sr., One Bright Star to Guide Them by John C. Wright, Pale Realms of Shade by John C. Wright, The Plural Helen of Troy by John C. Wright, and this is probably the category where we see the most obvious influence because there are 3 works by the same author, and 4 of these works are published by the same publishing house, which is the Castilla Publishing House, and that is the publishing house that is owned by Vox Day, who is the person who put together the Rabid Puppy slate. So, yeah.
And they say they're not self-serving, right?
So, I haven't read any of those. I don't know. I know, Rachel, you were reading some of the analog nominees, so did you end up reading Flow?
Yes, I've read all of the 8 short fiction and 1 best-related work that's been available online, and I'd say don't bother. If my opinion is worth anything, it's... Where did I have it over here? Oh, my first note is practically no plot and no female characters, but above all, boring. It was not fun to read.
The no female characters could come in for a lot of things that are not puppy-ish. Like, seriously.
Yeah. So yes.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's
you know, if you're someone who says I don't like messages in my fiction, I don't like preachy stories, and then you turn around and you nominate guys like Tom Kratman and John C. Wright for everything.
Oh, well,
You just
I don't
need to
wanna jump
back up.
But the short story category has the Lou Antonelli story on a spiritual plane, and that's the one where I finally got to, and I was like, okay, they cannot claim that any of their stuff is apolitical. It was a blatantly religious, spiritual story trying to masquerade as science fiction. It was pretty obvious what the author was trying to do there.
Yeah.
Alright, so
I mean, there's nothing wrong with a bit of religion in stuff, and I say this as an atheist, but yeah, you can't claim apolitical when you're doing that. Although, you know, like I said, it's part of what they consider to be normal. It's anti-religion. Is the message thing. It's all message.
Yeah, the actual content of that story, it actually had an interesting idea. It wasn't the best science fiction story, though. It was kind of hand-waving around the science fiction, and but the interesting idea was appealing at first.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the rest of? Let's just move on to like dramatic presentation long form, which is kind of
Okay, here I can wait.
so the the nominees here are Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Edge of Tomorrow, Guardians of the Galaxy, Interstellar, and the Lego Movie. And personally, I have to say I don't think it really affected here. I think these are probably what we would have gotten no matter what. I don't know. What do you guys think about the movies?
Nah.
I find that the Hugo the Hugo Award just has less weight regarding the moving picture medium.
Oh, yeah.
Not that it's bad to be nominated or receive an award, but it's just sort of, these movies tend to win so many other awards that I think people people give more weight in that category. And but for this one, I put my money on Interstellar just because of just that the filmmaking aspect of it and just the solid commitment that was behind that film. Not necessarily that the film was like the best film ever made or anything, but I just feel that one was the most science fiction-y, spacey kind of one. I think it's almost a shoe-in for it. The other ones could win too, but that's the one that kind of stands out to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that Interstellar certainly has a shot because it is the one that has most of its feet in the real world, in the actual science fiction realm of things, even though I think it gets into metaphysical stuff. But I can't probably discount the fact that there are just a whole lot of Marvel MCU fans out there who have so much love for Guardians of the Galaxy that I think it's going to be a Guardians year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was a really fun movie, but I wouldn't compare it to Interstellar.
No, neither would I. But again, we're talking, yeah.
I'd rather Guardians than Interstellar. Interstellar is like a dreadful, fun, trashy action movie remade by some guy on an MFA. Really.
Well, it's interesting when you have a ragtag group of characters. It's like Guardians of the Galaxy and Rat Queens are kind of same vein, different mediums, but they, there's some, so I mean, they're both fun. They're both fun.
I can't really speak in this one because I am not a film person. So.
Yeah, I've actually seen 3 of these, which is a little bit abnormal for me. I've seen Edge of Tomorrow, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Interstellar. I'll probably vote for Edge of Tomorrow because I really like that movie a lot more than I thought I was going to. But
that one was fun, yeah. Or that one was cool too. It was, Interstellar, maybe just because it has a lot of its roots in other pieces of written fiction, just sort of like the black hole stuff. It's like Frederick Pohl's Gateway. If you've got I don't know, the killer robots. It's just because Interstellar kind of covers a lot of tropes.
I love the Kit Kat robots in Interstellar. I have to admit, I want to.
I kept thinking of Silent Running when I saw them. They just remind me so much of those robots who are just sort of there the whole story, and you kind of get buddy with. And anyway.
Yeah, the Silent Running robots are a little more huggable, and this was just a big metal Kit Kat, and I want one.
But if you're talking about links to written fiction, then Day After Tomorrow is All You Need Is Kill.
Yeah, which is also a pretty good book. I read that book, and that book is pretty good. Yeah. It's actually fairly different than the movie. Okay.
But certainly by the standards of Hollywood summer blockbuster, escapist fare, Edge of Tomorrow was a considerable cut above, just in terms of smarts and skill and cleverness. And you got to see Tom Cruise constantly being killed, so there's no downside,
I find the repetition of stories in Edge of Tomorrow interesting, or the Groundhog Day style of movie, because you can't write a bad one. When you have a person and all of a sudden you get to that point where it's and now they're going to die, or they're going to reset the clock and go back to the beginning, you could write a totally bad scene, and then you're okay, that scene's not working, let's go back and rewrite the scene, and that'll be the next scene in the movie, and you just keep doing that until you get a good story. So you could put all the crappy moments in your script into the movie and just be well, that's where the character fails, and then we'll just do it again. And I don't know, if you look at it, the repetition storyline when it's been used in Stargate, if it's been used in Groundhog Day, that's kind of the way it goes, where it's always interesting because you want to see how it will change and improve with each draft, so to speak. Anyway, a little bit of an aside there.
So the short form, which is mostly not movies, TV shows, we have Doctor Who Listen, The Flashpoint, or The Flash, Flash Pilot. Sorry.
Pilot episode.
Yeah, I just totally misread that. Game of Thrones, The Mountain and the Viper, Grimm, Once We Were Gods, and Orphan Black by means which have never yet been. This is interesting because the Doctor Who fandom is one of the fandoms within the Worldcon that's traditionally been very well organized and gotten a lot of Doctor Who episodes onto the ballot. So, yeah, actually a little bit more of a different spread of works here. I don't know.
Does Doctor Who tend to win, or does it get nominated frequently?
It has won. Like, I think some of the really famous episodes won, but last year it was Game of Thrones, I think.
Yeah, the Red Wedding episode one.
Yeah, oh yeah. But this year, I really, really, really want Orphan Black to win because it's the most amazing show. Like, somebody needs to recognize that it's Tatiana Mosley is just the most amazing actress. I can't believe they're all the same woman.
I
need to start watching that.
I love that show, and that episode in particular was one of my favorites. It was really good.
I need to watch season 2. I remember when it was coming out. Oh, like last April. That's when it'll start. And I was like, I can finally watch it, and I still haven't watched it.
Watch it.
I'm going to.
But yeah, I think it'll be tough against Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones is probably the most recognizable thing on there now. Especially Mountain and the Viper. It was a big episode and stuff. So.
Yeah. I am not up on my binge watching, so sadly this is one where I can't really have an opinion. But what I hear is there is a lot of love for Orphan Black. So so that fandom is very much picking up, and so could pose a formidable threat to Game of Thrones.
I think it's growing, and I think even if it doesn't get it this year, there's another series coming out, so maybe it'll slowly pick up over the years. I think that it's one of those TV shows that has a growing audience.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys want to skip down? I'm going to skip around a little bit to things that I think we might actually have stuff to talk about. I was going to go to yes, best music video, the sci-fi genre. I was going to go with best semi-prosine. I know a lot of people probably won't be interested in this, but I think
semi-prosine is always a good one.
And Rachel will be. So this is Abyss and Apex, Andromeda's Spaceways in Flight magazine, Lightspeed magazine, Beneath Ceaseless Skies magazine, and Strange Horizon. Personally, I'm pulling for Beneath Ceaseless Skies in this because they're probably my favorite of the online magazines that I read. And they mostly do fantasy, and they tend to publish works that are both the short story and novelette length. And overall I just really like them, and I don't think they've won yet, so I would like to see them win this year.
I'll be going for Strange Horizons. I nominated them to be there, so it would make sense. And I met Niall at EasterCon. That was very nice. He's a lovely guy, and I really like the stuff they publish. More importantly, it's always very unusual. It's like pushing the boundaries, and it's very social justice warrior, which I'll take that title.
Anybody else? I know Elizabeth and I are the ones who really read the online short stories. Anybody else have anything on this one?
I'm too new to the world of online short stories to really weigh in on it. I'm learning.
Yeah, I don't really have a dog in the hunt, but I know that a lot of them are really respected. I like what I have read on both Lightspeed and Strange Horizons, and I need to catch up with Beneath Ceaseless Skies. So, I guess yet another thing on my growing list.
And then, do you want to talk about best fan cast quickly? This is the category that I think we all are technically eligible for, but it's mostly podcasts every year.
Wait, don't. Oh yeah, we are.
Yeah, because it's video.
I was gonna say not group.
So this is Adventures in SF Publishing, Dragon Crawlers Radio, Galactic Suburbia Podcast, The Sci-Fi Show, and Tea and Jeopardy. Of those, I've listened to episodes from the first 3 Adventures in SF Publishing, Dragon Crawlers Radio, and Galactic Suburbia Podcast, and I'll probably vote for the last one. I'll try and listen to a couple of episodes from the other ones, but assuming they don't blow me away, that's what's gonna happen.
Galactic Suburbia is my big favourite. I love those guys. I think it's a brilliant podcast. Tea and Jeopardy's not one of my favourite. I'm not sure about the presentation, but I know loads of people who love it, so it's always going to be a strong contender. Sorry, Kat.
I adore Tea and Jeopardy. If you listen to it for long enough, there's a story that goes along with it, and it's so much fun. I nominated it. It was the only thing I nominated in this category that made it.
I met her. I can't remember her name now.
Emma Newman.
Yeah. She's lovely. She's so nice. We had tea and cake.
That's the most British thing ever.
Any other podcast listeners? Or is it? Yeah, I guess some of the categories are a bit obscure.
There are a couple that didn't make it this year. Do we want to talk about those? I mean...
Oh, yeah. Sure.
There were a couple that I was really expecting to see this year because they were so popular last year. This category doesn't historically change that frequently.
Yeah.
So the absence of like the Coode Street podcast and the Skiffy and Fanty show, and there's the Reader and the Critic that was nominated last year. They're quite popular. I was expecting to see them again this year.
I'm guessing that maybe the puppies didn't have a full 5 listed, maybe?
They didn't. Theirs were... So I looked this up because I was kind of interested.
I know Adventures in SF Publishing was one of theirs.
They were Adventures in SF Publishing, Dragon Crawlers Radio, and the Sci-Fi Show, which I thought was interesting. So Adventures in Sci-Fi Publishing did kind of like not really a debate series. They had a show where they had Larry Correa, I don't know how to say his last name. Larry Correa and Correa and Brad Turgeson on, and then they had a opposing views webisode like a couple of months later. Yeah, I've listened to them before. I like them. I don't think they're my favorite, but I do like them. And Dragon Crawler Radio I've also listened to, and again I like, but I'm since I've been doing BookTube, I haven't been following podcasts as much, so they've kind of been ones that fell by the wayside for me. Yeah, but yes, they only had 3, and they all made it.
Yeah, which suggests that Galactic Suburbia and Tea and Jeopardy got quite a lot of nominations compared to some of what would have been the more popular ones last year.
Mm-hmm. Although Galactic Suburbia was on last year, weren't they?
Yes, but I think they came in 4th or 5th.
Okay.
And Tea and Jeopardy was on last year as well.
Oh, I didn't realize that. And yeah, I don't know. Are there any other categories you guys really want to talk about? A lot of the other ones, like the best editors and stuff, are things that I normally don't know who the people are. To be totally honest with you, I'm not super.
The Campbells are always very exciting to look at. You know, that's looking at rewarding new talent, and of course this year we got Wesley Chu, who is the guy that I know of, and I know Carrie English I think is a puppy nominee. I don't really know.
Wesley Chu is the only non-puppy nominee in this category.
Oh, okay then. All right. Well then, I guess go Wesley. Gosh, am I being biased here? No, but yeah, it's that's again. Maybe that's a category that they're really determined to dominate because the evil Scalzi got it, and so we must show him up. Who knows? But.
And
I think it was just because it was such what they would call a social justice warrior award last year. It was incredible. It was like 4 women and 1 guy of color, and it was Sophia Samatar won it, and it was probably the most diverse category last year.
And I don't know if they had 4 or 5 in this category. I remember being kind of surprised that Wesley Chu was on there at all. So he must have done a really good job of convincing people. So yeah, seeing Wesley Chu on there has actually made me really want to pick up his books, which didn't super appeal to me previously because.
I remember seeing a list of the people who were eligible for the Campbell Award this year in their first and second years, and he was one of the few higher profile ones that I actually recognized on the list. He was on the list last year, if I remember correctly, so I wasn't too surprised that he got so many nominations to end up on the short list. And, I mean, if you vote for him because he's the only non-sad puppy person on that, that's probably fine. I think he's actually quite deserving of it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Has anyone read The Lives of Tao or?
Yeah,
I've read the
I've
first
read it.
book in the series.
Yeah, it was good. It was a lot of fun. It's a very fun series.
and the Rebirths of Tao is just out.
He's got a new high-profile book with a lot of buzz coming out. I forget the title of it. but I
Time
think
Salvager.
yes, which sounds really interesting.
The cover art was really cool for that too. That they released. As I drop everything off my desk here, the cover art was really cool. Anyway, go books.
Yay!
So yes, so I guess does anybody have anything else to mention, or any of the other categories that you guys want to talk about?
I just wonder regarding the Hugos. Sort of what everybody, what do you feel about? This is not about what's happening with Set Puppies or anything, but what do you guys think about the Hugo Awards? Like, how do you feel about them as an award? What do they mean? What do they mean to you? That's kind of a question I've kind of got for people.
Yeah, I'll answer that. For me, at least, different times in my life, I've drifted in and out of reading more science fiction and fantasy and less at different times. And when I've been reading less, the Hugos have always been something I've looked at and been like, oh, the Hugos are out. I wonder if there's anything that I've missed in this year of not reading very much, and kind of looked at it to see what's, I didn't really read anything this year. What are the top couple things that I should at least know about? So I don't know if there's other people like that, or that are kind of not big readers but still kind of want to keep their finger on the pulse a little bit and use the Hugo Awards to do that. But that was definitely the way I approached it for a few years when I was not reading as much SFF stuff.
Yeah, to me, they've always been the thing with the history. They're the older award of most of them, all of them, I think. And so they've got that weight of time behind them, if nothing else. And because of that, they're the one that is the most known outside the genre. They're the one that you see on the book covers. Like, publishers will make sure to put Hugo Award winning on the front of things. Even things like Watchmen, which you could do perfectly well without it because it's in comics and graphic novels. That's not necessarily a genre that needs the Hugo backing, has a big thing on the side of the edition that I've got which says Hugo Award winner. So it's something that I kind of knew about before I knew about it. But yeah, it's one of those that it's perfectly possible that it will just become another award. It can just be as other awards rise and fall.
I remember growing up and being a kid, and when I was just starting to read SF quite a lot and educate myself in what was out there, what were the classics, what were the cool new writers that I would want to pay attention to, and having that Hugo Award-winning novel, Hugo Award-winning author of, on the cover was a thing that you could look at and say, okay, and it was a helpful sort of a signpost as to, an indicator of there's some quality here, there is something to pay attention to, there's a consensus that this is what's worth paying attention to. And I don't want that, in as much as you want to be someone who takes awards seriously at all, and there are some people just say, I don't care, and that's fine. I mean, if awards are just utterly meaningless to you because you read what you want to read, that's great, and I'm all for that. But I would think it would be a shame if that got lost, if Hugo Award winner just meant nothing because of the character of the whole process changing, because of it being this thing that was, it's this annual conflict between special interest groups and fandom, and voting blocks, and red team versus blue team. I would think it would be a shame if the Hugos just sort of lost that quality that it's always had. So yeah, that I'd like to see. In as much as SFF should expand and grow and become more diverse, and we need more awards reflecting more points of view, different cultural points of view. I mean, the Hugos, generally supposed to be honest, it's mostly an American award, right? It tends to non-Anglophonic work and European stuff and from other parts of the world doesn't really get. So it's not really an indicator of what's going on globally in SF. So yeah, I mean, we need more awards and more communities out there doing this sort of thing. But I still wouldn't want the Hugos to be completely stripped of its meaning and tainted by, just people using it as a football or whatever they want to use it for, whatever kind of platform they're trying to use to claim it. It shouldn't be that.
Building on what Thomas has said, like I follow awards obviously, and I was organizing stuff for this because I enjoy following awards, and I like the Hugo Award in particular because of its long history. But I do have to say that in the past years, like in the past 3 or 4 years, the way I've been finding books has shifted a lot more to online reviews. So obviously we're all here because we have booktube channels and we review books. And so in the past few years, that sort of word of mouth advertising has been a lot more influential to me than awards. And seeing what, like the Goblin Emperor is something that I found because it had really great buzz pretty early on a lot of blogs that I follow, and so that's what encouraged me to pick it up, and that's why I picked it up already. So while I do think awards have a lot of value, I think in the environment that we're in, it's really easy for them to kind of become passé and for people to focus on either individual reviewers they like or websites that recommend books that they like. And so, I mean, yeah, I think in some ways the sort of apathy that we've seen in terms of Hugo nominations that led to this issue is partially due to the fact that awards don't have as much strength and as much relevance as they might have had before the internet was a thing that everybody was using and super plugged into. So
yeah, and I mean it's worth noting that like most awards, especially because of its nature as one that is like fan voted or like relatively open and all that, the stuff that's going to win and get nominated and stuff is going to be more prevalently coming from big publishing houses, stuff that has a big like publicity behind it, and this has changed a bit this year because of the politics, and there are always a few outliers that come in and whatever, but there's a lot of amazing stuff coming out of small and indie publishing houses that is just never going to get the level of exposure that you need to get a popular award like this.
I would agree with that. There's probably a place in the SFF community for indie or self-published awards.
Well, I mean, even in those, you've got the opportunity of things like the Nebulas and all these other awards to suggest these things, and the judges and the panels are meant to be relatively widely read, and they do get awards in other things. But yeah, it's just that thing in a popular-based awards, you have to have a certain level of exposure, and because lots of stuff is coming from smaller things, they're just not going to get it.
Yeah, the only award that I see regularly recognizing and even awarding itself to small press releases would be the Philip K. Dick. But, if people are talking about changes in the Hugos, and of course there's this hilarious hashtag of new Hugo categories that people have been having. Which is magnificent. But, here is a legit new Hugo category that I think I'd welcome. I wouldn't mind seeing a best small press / self-published work category in the future.
Yeah, I mean,
because
there's
that
always
reflects the new reality of, I'm back 10 years ago when I did my small press guidelines for people who were doing like the POD printing, and it was a whole different world, but even in that time, like within the last 10 years, the self-publishing has now become a lot more legit, and it is a much more significant, now that you can self-publish to Kindle and what have you, it has a presence now that I think the industry at large ought to just sort of respect for what it is. It is still the case, I think, that the mark of success in self-publishing is that a major publisher picks you up, right? So that's how that's why we all know about guys like Andy Weir and Hugh Howey, and this woman who just signed like $1 million contract for so many books after doing all these Kindle books. So, but at the same time, why not have a category that if we've got a best fan writer category and a best fan artist category, why not have a best self-published or small press category for the Hugos? I'd be okay with that.
I think that'd be a really interesting new category.
I'd be okay with that, although I want it to like not be exclusive. Like if someone like you can nominate a book that's a self-published or a small press book for both categories.
Oh yeah. Like when would it go into novel? Like does it hit a certain number of votes and pop over into novel or what?
Well, I would just want it to be like you can nominate it for both, and if you really think if you think that is both the best self-published indie press book and also the best novel of the year, you can nominate it for both, and there's nothing to exclude it, because I wouldn't want it to be like, I don't know. If it was really a great novel, I wouldn't want it to be like, the secondary award.
But I guess it's the same kind of thinking behind why the Oscars finally came up with a Best Animated Feature category, because animated features now have become a very important thing to the film industry annually now, and there are enough of them out there and so it became, well, do we just have one token animated movie on the Best Picture slot, or do we give them their own category where there can be 5 or 6 that are at least being recognized for the year?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that often the shortlist will get people a significant amount of publicity, certainly within the genre anyway, enough to move them up in the world.
All right. So on that note, anything else to add? I know that was Brock's question. Anybody else got any questions to bring in? I haven't been tracking questions terribly well from Twitter or anything because...
the comment tracker, when we came back the second time, it wasn't enabled, so it's been kind of hard to follow along with that.
Sorry. Yeah. So
we've got one comment that says, Rock mentioned Stargate, will you marry me?
What? All right, marriage proposals on live shows, great.
Oh, wait a minute, Stargate wasn't like Scalzi the story consultant on that? That's part of this SJW conspiracy. Uh-oh.
Oh my god.
Did it win any Hugos, or was it... I'm sure a Stargate episode must have been nominated for a Hugo here or there. Not that I can remember, though, but...
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions on the comments, so I guess if we don't have anything else to go over, then we can wrap it up. And so, yeah. Closing thoughts from everybody? Everybody want to... I don't know.
Stargate has had 2 Hugo nominations, just so you know.
Nice. Thanks for setting it up, Nicole. This was fun.
Yes, thank you all for joining me.
Yes, it was fun.
We were talking about right before this how I'm really glad I didn't set this live show up for immediately after the announcement.
Oh my god, no.
Yeah.
It would have been much more heated.
Just another hour and a half of silence and just...
Well, we could have done it as like the drunk post-Hugo live show. That would have been awesome.
I was very drunk by that point, yeah.
We'll have to do that next year.
Yeah. Everyone stay engaged, stay reading, keep the conversation going. Subscribe to all your favorite BookTube channels and be active on Twitter and follow blogs and talk about stuff and recommend stuff and share what you love out there that you're reading and just keep the community going. And
yeah, definitely suggest people great things to read, even if they're not award nominees and award winners, and there's always some exciting collections going on. I know Renee over at Lady Business was collecting great recommendations recently, collating them.
Stay engaged in fandom. It's fun. And I swear it's not all crazy political contentiousness. Most of it is really
No, other than that, other than the Hugo Awards this year, it's been lovely.
Alright, well, I guess with that, then we will sign off. So, thank everybody for joining us and for sticking with us through the technical difficulties. And I'm still hoping to do another live show during this award season at some point. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be about at this point, but I'll be sure to keep everyone posted. So, yep.
Thanks for inviting me on this.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.